Thank you so much for coming. Thank you so much for being here. We will start with the order in which we all are in the program. I just find it makes life a lot more easier. Today we have Dina, we have Nonhlanhla, and we have Londiwe and myself taking part in this discussion. Hope we can pick up on some of the things that we had from Patricia. I hope we can pick up from today until the end of the conference on a lot of things that some of us are thinking about and some of us would like to engage in. Thank you so much, and I will give over now to Dina to start.
Good morning. I hope you can hear me all the way to the back. You can see I'm a Vitsi and I'm used to teaching in Vits spaces where the mic sometimes doesn't work. Okay. So I will begin by saying that my paper is part of something bigger that I've been working on for a while now. It's a bigger project, and so I might speak about things that sometimes feel like I'm going off topic. Just bear with me, and I hope that you will be able to respond to and ask questions at the end. So I'm going to read because I'm also not very good at speaking off the cuff. So my paper is titled Beyond Shame Culture, ? Desire and Kenyan Women's Self-Representation Online. Self-representations online. I'm interested in understanding women's subjectivities in Kenya against a background of an androcentric public. This is a public that is often violently resistant to women who desire, want, or consume. A woman who desires is a Jezebel, a good time girl, a set of stereotypes that identify her as troubling femininity. Within this context, such figures are read within the confines of public shaming. Where there is admiration, there's also objectification and over-sexualization. Can we think about Black women who desire outside of the narrow parameters of sexual shaming? How do these women respond to these stereocastings? I use the public self-presentations of three popular female figures in Kenya, Akothee, Sidika, and Monroe, to map out what I argue is a terrain for engaging female desire in Kenya. This terrain is a neoliberal one, where their subjectivities are closely tied to the neoliberal definitions of making the body. And here I'm citing the work of Elias and others. Yet their presentations of selves, for me at least, is a provocation, demanding from us a look beyond moral shame cultures and to deal with what we have in front of us. It is difficult to make the argument that neoliberal subjects passively consume in contexts where such subjects actively choose how they consume and present themselves in public. I read these women symbolically as provoking debate about the publicly circulated ideas of morality in Kenya. I engage with the violent responses their visual presentations provoke. So I might not be able to cover all the nice things that I'm talking about, but I will try and get to where I will get before I'm told I have no time left. The bulk of scholarship that addresses women's self-representations at the moment focuses on post-feminist cultures and sensibilities. What this scholarship is clear on is the fact that self-representations of girls and young women in contemporary society has increased acutely in the age of digital media, and with it, the need for a more critical reading of what such representations might mean. Dobson, for instance, has argued that while girls and young women are seen as active producers of cultures online, they are also easily judged, dismissed, and shamed as being active in ways that society frowns upon. They are thought to be engaged in projects of self-representations driven by vanity or insistent social communication driven by insecurities and trivialities. It is, however, possible to read these online productions of selves as political. Referring to the work done by scholars of African popular culture, I argue that That which is political does not have to be overt in its display. Karim Baba's work, for instance, has shown us that actions in the everyday can in themselves demonstrate the kinds of refusals that are difficult to pin down, precisely because creative productions in the everyday are attuned to people's needs for survival, as well as people's very idea of living. Laurent Balland's idea of affect in the present, in many ways, points towards the sentiment of being alive in the moment, of doing what one does in the moment, without attachment to what she refers to as the promise of the good life. Balland questions the idea of the good life, the promise and the fantasy of it, as organized in a neoliberal context. For her, desire falls within this category of optimism for the future as long as what we desire is structured around conventional expectations. However, one important point she poses and which I dwell on is what happens when there is self-reflection? What does an internal counter-narrative do towards our understanding of liberal fantasy and commodity fetishism? How can we disrupt our understanding of the drama of the self? I want to look at selected young women's self-representations as disruptive of normative practices within their locations. A small note on public shaming. Balland's work underlines the value of indiscipline, citing shame as that which one is meant to feel if one steps out of an existing moral frame. Public shame is then a reminder that in fact, one has stepped out. The seeming inability to feel shame, in my opinion, is a refusal to participate in the illusion of the good wife or the good woman. Public shaming is the punishment. Recent scholarship on slut shaming and social media draw direct relations between one's reputation and sexual deviancy. Activists have pointed to the violent encounters of young women who are slut-shamed and related that to negative perceptions of especially girls and young women's sexuality around particular confined meanings. Slut-shaming is indeed part of the practice of public shaming. In thinking through subjectivity and agency then, this paper signals ideas of desire to demonstrate, and I'm reading desire very broadly, okay? To demonstrate the assertive ways of being in the world for women, where they take what they want, regardless of what others think. This is an ethic of choice. Patricia McFadden stresses the intellectual value of choice and pleasure for women in women's activist work. In the age of social media, to think in this way is, of course, optimistic. This is partly because desire is framed around social practice, and these social practices are caught within what Elias and others have argued have called aesthetic labor. This is in reference to the staging of beauty on social media, which includes the desire for contrived perfection, micro-celebrity status, commodification of the youthful beauty, digital alteration of a woman's beauty, as well as surveillance. How women acquire and display their cultural capital, and so on. It is a focus on how the self is optimized in a neoliberal context. This thinking is also optimistic because of surveillance more broadly. In their various discussions of surveillance, Elias, Gill, and Schaaf identify the radical expansion of surveillance in the digital age, which moves beyond Foucaultian argument of the panopticon gaze. They speak of other kinds of surveillance that have popped up within surveillance studies: synoptic surveillance, forensic surveillance, peer surveillance, and so on. The idea of being watched affects how subjectivity is organized and produced. How then can we think of what women want within these confines? And again, I urge you to please just work with me in terms of just connecting the dots, because I might not always do that. How then can we think of what women want within these confines? So the first thesis that I present is the thesis of hypervisibility, but treating hypervisibility as being difficult. To read the women I study as hypervisible is to acknowledge that they are difficult subjects. Pumla Dineo-Nola's Reflecting Rogue explores the idea of being difficult as a form of refusal to work within normative confines and expectations of what it means to be a good woman in a heteropatriarchal context. To be a good woman means to be a good citizen, or a good national subject, as the 9 reports reminds us. The family and the nation are here, seen as institutions whose values mold and offer inspiration for good women subjects. Difficult women defy these predetermined roles by choosing to present themselves in ways that are physically and symbolically disruptive. Difficult women are not momentary beings who can be cast aside when the novelty wears off. They are consistent in their refusal to disappear. In thinking through this point, I engage with Sarah Ahmed's idea of willful subjectivity. To be willful, she argues, is to refuse to conform to authority, a refusal for moral correction. And then I'll just quickly just note that I then think about what I call digital subjectivity as a space of freedom. And if you think about that in terms of the people that I look at, then it kind of gets into context. So in this paper, I refer to data collected mainly between 2014 and 2018, in which Esther Akoth, commonly known as Akode, Vera Sidika, and Huda Monroe, 3 young women, maintained an online presence documenting their lives across a range of social media platforms, including Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook, as well as YouTube. Their stories appeared in several tabloids online as well, sourced through interviews, rumor, and gossip. So I look at these different sites as doing very different work. Okay? The women were consistently referred to and typecast as socialites, a term that has gained currency in Kenyan media culture to refer to young women who are celebrities because of their social networks. No, I haven't even told you about these women. I rarely do that, by the way. So popular understandings of socialites are that there are no visible forms of labor or talent that account for their fame. In many cases, socialites inherit wealth as the basis of their lavish lifestyles. So I'll just skip. I'm hoping that I can tell you a little bit about these 3 women. Okay. So one way of entering into my discussion is to consider what their location in the public space within the context of patriarchy does to disturb hegemonic patriarchal norms. In reading the 3 of them, I'm aware of the arguments that have been made regarding their negative influences in society. However, I'm very interested in the symbolic value of what they're doing in terms of how they disrupt what I call the patriarchy. Oh, wow. Did have a lot. Okay. So I first came, so clearly I'll only just talk about one person. I first came across Vera Sidika in relation to a Facebook group called Campus Divas for Rich Men while working on an article on good time girls in contemporary Kenyan media in 2014. Sidika was not part of that Facebook group and was consistently cited in ensuing discussions by commentators who largely found her behavior and the behavior of these women as appalling. The women who participated in the groups existed only through posts advertising their availability for relationships with older rich men and through images depicting raunchy, desiring subjects. The reaction of the public towards the campus divas was reflective of a general attitude towards women's sex in the public sphere in Kenya. These women were consistently referred to as prostitutes with no moral boundaries, destroying the national fiber, and so on. So Sidika, a 26-year-old woman, became famous because of her distinctly slim waist and wide hips. She's publicly acknowledged also, she's acknowledged undergoing skin lightening, breast augmentation, and so on. And she presents herself as the ultimate post-feminist figure. She is then this celebrity. She's featured in several television shows. She's featured in several music videos, and so on. Sidika consistently presents herself online as this woman who just doesn't care. She doesn't know that. And she presents herself in that way, both in terms of visually, but also in things that she says. Reading her against the ways in which she's presented, and for the 3 of them, the way they're presented in tabloid newspapers and other kinds of public avenues, one then begins to get a sense of the work that the women are doing with social media in terms of constructing their own stories and the way that they want to be seen. None of them apologizes for who they are. All of them speak about their bodies as things that give them pleasure. All of them speak back. They wouldn't necessarily call themselves, I'll go off the car. They wouldn't ordinarily call themselves feminists, although Sidika quite recently did actually wear a shirt that said, I'm a feminist. And it's more, I'm a feminist, because it's the way in which it has been made popular in pop culture, especially for the Beyonce scholars in the room. And so she's a feminist, but I haven't interviewed her enough to know what her status is. But that doesn't matter. What matters to me is that every time I have presented work on Sidika and others, I have been met with resistance, and I have been met with, but she's a slut. Why are you spending time on her? And that kind of reaction. Quite recently, I was talking about violence, the increase in violence, and comparing that with the increase in women in public spaces. And I did get a response from the crowd where one person said, but have you interviewed young men who do these kinds of violence? And my response was, I really wasn't interested. That's not where my research was going. And so I'm open to comments, I'm open to questions, and I am quite happy to have more chats about the work that I'm doing, but this is the general sense. Okay.
Thank you, Dina. 15 minutes exactly. Was it 15 or 20? Huh? Is it supposed to be 20? Yes. Is it 20? Dina, you have 5 more minutes.
It's okay.
All right, Nonhlanhla, you'll have 20 minutes. Yeah.
I'm donating my 5 to questions.
Okay. Thank you so much, Dina.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Please forgive my voice, I have a terrible flu, so I hope that you'll be able to hear me. My name is Ndlovu. I'm a lecturer at MAST in Zimbabwe, and I recently completed my doctorate with Rhodes University. So today, I'm going to present part of my research, and the title is The Discursive Construction of Zimbabwean Women's Femininities Online. So basically I was looking at several groups on Facebook where Zimbabwean women join these groups and they talk about their experiences, and you'll find that some of them mostly living outside Zimbabwe. So in these spaces they come together and try to connect and talk about issues that affect them. So I looked at these groups as particular online spaces in which culture in the broadest sense of the term is produced through discourse. So in giving attention to the seemingly mundane everyday talk on these platforms, I probe the underlying discourses and the cultural practices that undergird such utterances, which consequently constitute particular corresponding subjectivities. So I'm interested in the construction of Zimbabwean women's femininities and with how they engage and negotiate their gender identities. And in the process, I look at which discourses are validated and which ones are backgrounded. Right, so now my theoretical concerns which inform my analysis, they're post-structuralist and post-colonial feminist theories, and then I also use Foucault's discourse, power, knowledge, governmentality, and the subject, as well as Mamdana's citizen and subject. So as I will elaborate as I do the actual analysis. I did a critical discourse analysis, so it was a purely textual research, and I used aspects of critical linguistics complemented with media studies, where I was looking at lexical structure, the transitivity choices, narrative, and rhetorical analysis. I studied these sites for a full year. So I believe that was online ethnographic research. And the group that I'm going to talk about today is called Makok's Women's League. It has to date 97,733 followers, and it's a social health forum where people post their problems that they have, was it personal problems, family problems, how to negotiate life in the diaspora, things like that. So I'm going to basically look at the two themes. The first one has to do with love and relationships, because this is the most popular and the most popular posts. They refer to love and relationships. Now, the posts on Makok's present a disturbing picture of marriage, which is colored with tales of abuse, adultery, witchcraft, and pain. And in these posts, different types of femininities contest with each other. So we have traditional femininities that are constituted within customary discourse that stand in contrast to rights-based modern femininities. So these competing sets of feminine subjects' positions presume different truths and discipline their subjects differently as well. So to discuss the different kinds of femininities that are constituted within these discourses, I examine marriage within Makok's as a contestation between married and unmarried women. That is, Omisis versus Omakwapeni, as they call them on the group. So, so the discursive contestation presents itself through a war of words between Omisis and Omakwapeni, and this is most clearly demonstrated by an incident that I term the Lunyoga saga. So Lunyoga is a fidelity charm. It's known as a traditional way of locking a spouse so that they cannot have sexual relations outside of the partnership. So on this particular day, there was a story that happened in Yuval in Johannesburg, and a particular couple had been locked during sexual intercourse. So there was a group of people that then went to congregate around that area. It's just that I have a picture of it, but it was a very large group. So like typical village gossip, it went viral, and people kept on going there and updating exactly what was happening. So this particular post now attracted 308 comments, and there were 96 likes and 11 shares. And as a way of lending credence to the event, the story was carried by the news website Bulawayo24 with the headline, "Married Zimbabwean Stuck to Nigerian Men After Illicit Sex." And Daily Sun, in typical tabloid fashion, carried the headline, "Sex Cheaters Get Stuck," and with a more outrageously explicit title on their Facebook page, "Stuck in Punani." So while there was a great deal of gossip about the characters and the circumstances surrounding this whole incident, some claim that the couple eventually died, and some claim that the actual husband of this woman had demanded 30 cows so that he could unlock them. So there was a lot of theories that were circulating around that. But what really drew my attention was how the discussion quickly escalated to a confrontation between Omisis and Omakwapeni. So this incident provided a way for the Omakwapeni and also those other women, the single women who are usually referred to as Omakwapeni, even though they are not. It provided them an opportunity to poke holes into the institution of marriage, to say that always on this group, you married women, you act like you are holier than thou, you act like marriage is all that and you are pure, but suddenly look at you now, what do you have to say for yourselves? And then on one hand, there were people who sympathized with this married woman that had been caught cheating. They said that there is no way a married woman would cheat for no reason. So the only way that she would engage in such is because the man was probably abusing her for a very long time. So one comment says, a married woman's infidelity is always justified. Whilst it's the human nature for men to cheat, women have no propensity for cheating. A married woman must be provoked for her to cheat. It is possible that this man has been abusing her or has been cheating on her for a long time. So she was taking revenge. So in this discursive consultation, the arguments that are in support of the adulterous married woman uphold the woman's status against all odds. Now, the arguments between the married and the married women raise questions about marriage, morality, and cleanliness. And these contesting discourses about marriage and morality function as disciplinary practices that act on the woman's body in order to regulate her conduct. The participants use different modes of argumentation and persuasion to make their point. So they argue about the issue of multiple partners. A married woman must never have multiple partners, and this also applies to women who have not yet been married. You must never have multiple partners. So these are some of the arguments that were coming up. And then you must always behave in conduct which allows you to attract the right man for marriage. And you cannot laugh at another woman's peril, because who knows, it might come back to you tenfold. And then no one is without sin, so let us not judge this woman. And then the ones that believe that were not sympathetic to the married woman, they say that a married woman is not allowed to cheat, never compete with the man. So here, my argument is that it is not clear who exactly says that the married woman is not allowed to cheat. Is it a law or whatever? So it's a deleted agent, which I believe is patriarchy in action. And who says that you must never compete with the men? Is it a competition to begin with? So it means that men are allowed to cheat whilst women are not allowed to cheat by this silent deleted agent. Now, I also argue that this contesting discourses about marriage and morality function as disciplinary practices in order to regulate women's conduct. This is evident because on one hand, the woman is called on to always strive to birth in order to get a suitable marriage partner. This means that she must deploy various technologies of the self to ensure that she always looks good and not date too many people to achieve the ultimate prize of marriage. She must police her behavior, and responsibility is placed squarely on her to make sure that she gets a suitable partner. However, the opposing discourse interpolates her as free and entitled to experiment as much as she wants without pressure of being married, because it's not everyone who wants to get married anyway. So I have a few other examples where the women who also posted saying that they wanted to get rid of isichito. Now, isichito is like a form of a breakup spell or curse that causes one's partner or other people in general to lose interest in the victim. So one effect of isichito is importance. So now this woman posted to say that her husband had been given this spell by the Makwapeni, and another woman also narrates that her husband has actually started beating her at home because of this Makwapeni, who has put this love spell on him. So now, as they post on the group, they actually wanting to ask for help. These women must go all out to save their marriages. And always women that post that they've been abused or they've been cheated on, the blame shifts to Mrs. It's because of you that your husband is cheating on you. And I have a comment here that says some misses do not respect their men at home to the extent that it's not clear who's the head of the house, because she also wants her presence to be felt. The men, run away, and Omakopeni welcomed them with both hands, whilst misses are busy going about 50-50. So this comment implies that it's probably the woman's fault that her husband has a roaming eye, and the equality discourse is evoked here as disadvantageous to women. It has been turned around to construe it as the cause of broken relationships. Now, let's move to the second theme, where I looked at the general kind of advice that is given to distressed women on this platform. And I argue that this advice operates as a disciplinary practice. So the kind of advice that is given on my post consists of 3 sets of responses, which can be quickly summarized as pray, live, and bath. So I offer an account of how a certain post-feminist position that is underpinned by the resonating discourse of neoliberalism explicitly manifests alongside other governing discourses such as religion. So there is a notable kind of evangelical Christian femininity that is promoted as an ideal through the conversations that the women have on Macox. So the first one I say is pray, which is demonstrating an evangelical femininity. So my argument is that evangelical Christianity on Macox and in Zimbabwean society in general operates as a hegemonic discourse that proposes particular truths, which in some instances serve to expurgate those who are not its subject. So traditional religious discourse automatically operates as other in the space, fighting for legitimacy. In these discursive realms, religion therefore serves not only as a moral compass, but more effectively as disciplinary practices, whose effect is to govern the soul. So the advice that women offer to each other is an attempt at governing the soul, and this disciplining frequently has recourse to spiritual and religious truth. So in almost every post in which somebody is troubled, the reflex response is an encouragement to pray. This prevalent prayer response is advocated in emphatic ways, particularly when there's a post about a woman who's being cheated on or being abused, as some of the earlier examples I gave. So in most instances, the woman is advised to pray like your life depended on it, fight for your marriage by prayer, by fire, by force, pray and claim your husband back. He rightfully belongs to you and not to this chancer. Bombard all this craziness by the blood of Jesus, because prayer conquers all. So most of them, they use this warlike lexicon so that they show just how much prayer is the answer to all your marital problems. So in being advised to be quiet, to persevere and stand by prayer because you're not supposed to question your husband, a particular patriarchy that is consistent with selected biblical tenets is legitimated and deployed to govern women's souls and consequently their conduct. Women are constituted powerfully within this discourse that they perform, that is in Butler's terms. They limit their agentic possibilities as they are constituted as willing subjects of Christianity. Now, because I'm running out of time, I'm just going to give an example that you need to hear before I go on. The women, the other responses I said is live and bath, isn't it? So if you have a problem with your husband, he's abusing you, he's cheating on you, the solution is to leave him. Why are you staying in that relationship? And the most interesting thing about it is that this leave response is almost always followed by bathing. It's operates as a sort of baptismal to say that you are now claiming your agency. So there is one woman who posted that her husband had started insulting her because she had recently gotten employment, and he argued that when she started working, she started behaving in very strange ways, and now this man went further to insult her using her private parts. So he argued that her private parts had turned watery. He actually likened it to a certain melon soup, I think some people might know it. It's made of mealies and a certain type of melon, and it's very watery in consistency. So he likened it to that. And then, so she posted on the group to say that, what should I do with this man? And then there were very interesting responses. Obviously, they told her, just leave him. It's because he's jealous, because now you are empowered. And they said you can't stand for such abuse in the name of marriage. Just leave him. And there is another, where is it? I want to find a comment. Right. So the others that were in solidarity with her, they said, okay, let me just read this. In typical Makok style, any situation can be turned into comic relief. There are some suggestions that she should also take revenge by not sleeping with him. They said, tell him that melons are off season. Tell him that because his penis is too small, it's like a toothpick, it's like a teaspoon, you've got a wire, so he doesn't satisfy her. And alternatively, his oversized penis, like that of a horse, is the one that has made her genitalia to be watery. So it's a kind of solidarity that women offer each other, and it becomes a sort of comic relief. And I believe that it makes them feel better somehow. So now, in conclusion, I believe that there is the discursive subjects that are endorsed here presume a neoliberal femininity that incorporates a neoliberal post-feminist sensibility and is underpinned by a deep sense of evangelicalism. So I didn't get into the post-feminist part, but that's where the women encourage each other to stand tall, be proud of who you are, wear heels, wear makeup, feel good about yourself. So for them to actually do that, it is imperative that they actually consume first for you to get into that particular culture. So that is my conclusion, that a distinct post-feminist discourse culminates in the responses to validate particular sexual conduct beyond the constraints of monogamy. It presumes freedom associated with engaging in paid labor and works to produce neoliberal subject position that corresponds with the demands of capitalism.
Okay, Sanmonani. So so I will move between languages. So at some point, if you don't understand, touch your neighbor for some kind of translation, or just wave. So my presentation is titled "All Your Faves Are Problematic: Understanding Feminism in Its Contradictions." The title is adapted from an article AI Balosi Sonkamsimang after Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie had a little bit of a shibilik, a transphobic shibilik, and so she problematizes stan culture in that article. And so part of this presentation is to do that, but also to then try and think critically about the way that we conceptualize ourselves. So maybe just for the logic of the panel, think about my paper as the other side of the coin of Dina's paper, right? So maybe that will give the presentation some kind of logic. It's a paper that I'm still working on and developing. So some of the arguments are not fully formed, some of them are just questions. So main arguments, I want to analyze the two, I want to argue that things like Black Girl Magic, the hashtags Black Girl Magic, Black Excellence, Melanin Popping, those kinds of hashtags are actually conceptual tools, right? So we need to be able to think about pop culture feminism or feminism that's happening on Instagram as a conceptual thing, right? It's not just some celebrity said this and that's what's happening. Like, it's not political. It's something that's political, and especially when it comes to these hashtags, because everyday women then adopt them, right? So I then, as Londiwe from Escort, and then aspire to a kind of Black Girl Magic, or I think of myself as Black Girl Magic, or I think of myself as Black Excellence in whatever way, right? So because these are things that then can be assigned or adopted by everyday women and everyday feminists, everyday pro-women people, then we must be able to think about them politically and what do they mean and how do they then interact with our realities. As much as I am a feminist and Black Girl Magic and, you know, slaying hair adverts, what does that mean for me in my real life, right? Where I come from KZN, an incredibly patriarchal Zulu nationalist kind of society. What does that mean, right? And at the point at which my feminism and my magic then interacts with that society, when I become contradictory, must you guys then cancel me? Am I cancelled, or is it a space for us to theorize? And I want to argue that it gives us a space to theorize and to push ourselves and our feminism a little bit further. So I also want to then think critically about whether these tools of concept of us, so whether or not things like Black Girl Magic, Black Excellence, Melanin Popping are not exclusionary or do not essentialize Black women's identities. Want us to think about the exceptionalism that stan culture creates and how we engage that. And I want to problematize stan culture, ultimately arguing that contradictions are inevitable and they are necessary for the feminist movement, for us to move, right? And I'll try and make this a little bit clearer as I go. So the slides are a little bit packed. I've highlighted the things that I think are important for you to know. The other stuff is really for me. So conceptions of black womanhood, where do they happen? You know, mainstream feminism, Black feminism, African feminism, all these different feminisms, media, pop culture, theater, internet, all these spaces. And I mean, I think Dina has done a good job of sort of contextualizing that space. That's where these conceptions happen. When you think about Black Girl Magic, most of the time you think about that graduation, that red gown, you think about succeeding in corporate, buying a car, having a job. You think about, when you think about melanin popping, you think about I don't know why, but like they always find the most African, most melanin of melanin looking person, right? And even with models, I mean, you know, we see it with Fashion Week. They always, if you are not Lupita, you are not melanin popping, right? Oh. So there's a very clear understanding of who it is that we talk about when we talk about someone who is melanin popping. And I want to also like just maybe bring our attention to the fact that those people usually have the mainstream markers of beauty, so the cheekbone, the skinny, the, you know, all of that, right? Which I'm not too sure then what it is that we are problematizing, or what narrative it is that we are shifting when we say melanin popping, and the only thing that you can think about is Lupita. So we must be able to then think critically about the way that we melanin pop or that we Black Girl Magic, right? And so that's what I'm trying to do with this paper. So I argue that power determines the way that, what is represented, how it's represented, who is represented, right? So the way that we've been conceptualizing Black women as the Jezebel, like the people who just want welfare, sluts, don't, all the words that have sort of come up throughout the panel. it's on purpose, that conceptualization. It's not by like pure mistake. It's on purpose that the people who have been perceived as dominant in the narrative of black women have that kind of narrative, right? It's on purpose that they speak about us in that kind of way. And so I argue that black girl magic and melanin popping, black excellence is a way for black women to push against that narrative, right? To conceptualize ourselves for ourselves. And while that's true and while that's fantastic, we must then also be able to think critically about our own spaces, about the way that we conceptualize ourselves, and how that sometimes is, influenced by our world and our context, right? And then, so a lot of the time when people critique pop culture feminism, they'll be like, oh, it's not political, it's just a buzzword, don't. That's what I'm trying to say here is that we need to be able to think about it as political, as I've said earlier on, and we need to think about pop culture or celebrity feminism even as a way that critically, that can, as a tool that can critically theorize us, and we can theorize ourselves in that space. And so it's a political process, and I think that the idea that it's not takes away from the masses that it reaches, that one, and their ability then to be critical of the message that they receive, right? To argue that the masses simply aren't critical, they'll just eat up whatever it is that you are giving them is a little bit it's a little bit disingenuous. Okay. And so we must be able to think about the masses as a rigorous group, right? And then and also, so the pro-black hashtags that we're talking about here are about saying I see you, right? They're about saying I see myself, I see you, I see other black women, but they're also about affirming and unapologetically so celebrating each other, right? And this is important, right? Because we know the history of black women and how we've been theorized and all of that, right? But then what we do with these hashtags is that we create particular aesthetics, and part of the reason for this is because where these hashtags happen, so it's social media, right? It's the internet, it's that kind of thing. Instagram is based on aesthetics. In order to get your 200 likes, the post must be aesthetically, it must be for the gram, right? So there are pictures that we take that are not for the gram. There are pictures that we take that are for the gram. And those of us who use Instagram understand exactly what that means, right? So the aesthetics then of black girl magic, if they are then attached to these platforms, to these social media platforms, it means that we create very specific kinds of aesthetics, right? So we create on fleek. We create your black renegade. We create your new South African woman, as Pumla Gola would call it. We create these women that are like actually in reality unattainable, right? So these women that are doing everything, they are in corporate, they are climbing the ladder, and they are doing this morally, right? So we attach all of these things to this black girl magic. Then we attach a particular aesthetic to this black girl magic. I can tell you right now, in my everyday life, when I go to my job, I don't look black girl magic in terms of Instagram. I don't look at because I'm busy. I don't have time to wake up an hour earlier to make sure that my cheekbones are highlighted so that they, I don't have time to do that. So I'm arguing that when we create these identities, the thing that happens when we then everyday women adopt them and perform these things, we fall short. And then we are angry with ourselves because we are not black girl magic. Or we get cut out because you are not black girl magic and you haven't met whatever requirements are there for you to be black girl magic. And also, the thing about aesthetics and the thing about celebrating blackness that's a little bit weird is this hyper exoticizing, I don't know if that's a real word, of black women, right? So we must be Nubian queens. We must have dreadlocks. Your fro, don't like, yeah, but part of that aesthetic is not only your corporate weave, slay, what, it's also, you must be on the extreme opposite of the, you must be the African woman. That earring with the Africa, you must do all those things, right? So because we create boxes for women to fit into, and as soon as you are like sort of in between, or you one day, as you see me now, I have my wig on. Definitely tomorrow when you see me, I'll have my dreads out. Now it's awkward for you because you are not able to understand me in my complexities as I shift between the women that I am every day, right? And so part of the problem is creating these hyper exoticized ideas of what black women look like. And also then, if, as the Beyonce scholars in the room, if then we want to think critically about the things that I'm talking about, how do we think critically about Beyonce and a representation of black girl magic, right? Also, when Beyonce stays with her cheating husband, right? Or when Jay-Z cheats on Beyonce, what is the feminist response? Leave him, throw him, don't. But what is it that the complication then becomes for me that I think feminism is about us being able to choose what we want. Like freely. I want to be able to make that choice. Not saying that it's right, it's wrong. It's not a moral conversation. It's about whether or not Beyonce can say, actually that's Jay-Z, and actually I'm done. Or she can say, there's something bigger than this guy and he's cheating that I'm staying for here. Whatever it is, I don't know what her thinking was, right? But all I'm saying with this part of the presentation is that whatever is the feminist response, we must be able as feminists to say, I wouldn't have responded that way, but you have the choice to respond that way. I would have done this and this and this. I'm advised out Beyonce, it's fine. But the fact that she has the choice to react a particular way and to perform herself, that's for me the bottom line. Also with Beyonce, when it comes to things like where her clothes are made and who makes the clothes, are those people paid, are they underpaid? All those questions. Those are things that we must be able to think about without going straight to defending Beyonce. Beyonce never said she's not a capitalist. She never said that. And so she'll have all the traps of the capitalists, right? Whether she's a black woman or not, she'll have all the things that come with capitalism. And so when we then think about black girl magic and we think about us interacting or us performing of capitalism, when we are black girl magic, nine capitalism, nine consumerism. What is that thing? And then, so I think some of these things I've said, but so when we then think about, when we then think about intersectionality, this part is really about us being able to think about the complexities of black women and not assuming or assigning particular identities to black women that really in real life none of us can meet. So one of the things that I want to then talk about is exceptionalism and the limitations of stand culture. I think that one of the things that these pro-women, pro-black hashtags and conceptual tools, one of the things that they do is that they create these exceptional women that we put on pedestals, right? Like, they can't, and so the trap with exceptionalism is that one, for yourself, was born by, in fact, you are here, right? And so you think that one, no one can touch you, no one can critique you, you know, we can't engage you anymore, right? Two, the thing about exceptionalism is that it creates, so the thing that allows Chimamanda to say, I say what I said, right, as a response, is that she is beyond critique. And part of that is that she, I have stands, right? Her stands, we all know most what stand culture is. Okay, so guys, so stand culture is like, so think about Beyonce, think about the Beehive. Those are her stands. Those are the people who rather die for Beyonce, right? So Chimamanda has the same thing, or not too sure what's going on there, right? The thing about stan culture is that then, if I am Beyonce's stan, I will always defend her. No matter, I will fight tooth and nail for Beyonce, right? That's the thing about being in the Beehive. That thing, we signed that thing with blood. You will fight tooth and nail for Beyonce, regardless of what it is that she does, or the message that she's producing. Even when you don't agree, and when you don't agree, you rather keep quiet, right? And so, with this example, Chimamanda, I want us specifically as the, what's the word, cis-het people in the room, to think about what it is that we were defending when we were defending Chimamanda, what it is that we were questioning when we questioned Chimamanda, and how we do that in our real lives, right? And so if we can agree that Chimamanda interacts with a particular context, she comes from a particular context, and we can agree about what that context is or what the influences of that context are, we must be able to agree that her feminism and her performance of a feminism and the reality of a feminism will be contradictory. Right? My performance of my feminism as a gogo, when I go back to Mntambo, and it's incredibly patriarchal, and I have to be assigned certain things that really in my normal life I don't have to engage with, right? What does that mean when I actively participate in that thing? Right? When the patriarchy assigns all the things that it assigns to me in that moment as a sangoma, what does that mean what does it mean when I participate in that thing? Should you guys cancel me? So that's the thing that I want this presentation to be able to allow us to grapple with. And I want us to think about what I'm saying critically. I welcome questions, disagreements, canceling. I welcome all of that. I hope that it allows us to do what I set out to do. Thank you.
I always say to my students, technology never works, so that's it. I'm not going to be bothered about that. I'll try and explain this. It's just a one and a half minutes skit. My paper? My paper is Don't Mess with Kansiime. Kansiime is a Ugandan comedian who has been referred to as the African queen of comedy. As a comedian in a predominantly male environment, Kansiime's comedic style is transgressive, confrontational, assertive, forceful, but her material tends to deal with issues that empower women. She always portrays women in unconventional gender roles. Her female characters are not passive and submissive. Instead, she depicts strong women who refuse to show any deference to hegemonic structures. In other words, she speaks for women. Lynda Alcroft reminds us rituals of speaking are politically constituted by power relations of domination, exploitation, and subordination. Who is speaking? Who is spoken of? And who listens is a result as well as an act of political struggle. In this presentation, I would like to examine how a female comedian like Kansiime transgresses dominant discourses in society by using humor and online platforms to interrogate social and cultural expectations of women and critique patriarchal society. To this end, I probe the following questions, which I won't get to all at this time. What is female and feminist humor? What role do online platforms play in circulating humor beyond physical national boundaries? What kind of alternative insights does transgressive humor in Uganda offer us in relation to gender politics and identity? So Kansiime is an accomplished, multi-talented entertainer. She's an actress, she's a singer, dancer, and she's won numerous awards for her comedy. These include, amongst others, the Nollywood and African People's Choice Award for Favorite Comedian, the Black Entertainment and Film, Fashion and Television Award for Best Comedian, and as one of Africa's best known comedians, she has performed to sold out events in countries such as Kenya, Uganda, Rwanda, Malawi, Namibia, South Africa, Botswana, England, Malaysia, and so on. One could argue that her popularity can be attributed to the way in which she has been able to build her brand of comedy via new and social media platforms, using platforms such as YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and also she has an official website. She started performing comedy with Theatre Factory, and she did this while she was studying for her undergraduate degree at Makerere University. When Theatre Factory collapsed, she joined Fun Factory, one of Uganda's leading comedy group, who performed up to this day weekly at the Uganda National Theatre in Kampala. She began doing her comedy sketches on Minibuzz, a daily television program that aired on NTV in Uganda. Her short skits were included to lighten the otherwise heavy political discussion on different aspects of life on the continent. As Odomoro Mubambizi observes, in Africa, most political analysts tend to focus on big themes such as regional integration, armed conflict, Africa rising, Africa-China relationship, trade, Ebola, etc. But to turn some analytical tools to an individual who has no political clout is something new coming out of Africa. But also what makes Kansiime an attractive choice is an area of entertainment she has delved into that tends to be neglected when we talk about developmental discourse. In other words, Kansiime's skits were supposed to provide some form of comic relief from the more serious and often disheartening views. Her humorous skits offer alternative insights on and understandings of various complicated and political discussion. These short skits were successful, extremely successful, so much that they become more popular than the original show she started on. And this led to the production of standalone sketches, which were then uploaded onto the internet. Using the internet as a platform, she was able to broaden her scope while circulating her brand of humor to a global audience. When her audience began to demand for weekly skits from her, she partnered with Minibuzz and joined YouTube. And then she began uploading weekly videos under her name Kansiime. At the moment, and this was, I mean, at the moment it's not like 300,000 because now I'm talking about at least 4 years ago when she was doing this. She has over, I think she has over 1 million subscribers. In addition, she was offered a comedy show on Citizen TV in Kenya called Don't Mess with Kansiime, and that's where the title comes from. And that used to air once a week. And now it also broadcasts on NTV in Uganda. Because of her notoriety, made her famous.
Are you calling me? You're calling me? Did you call me here? What's your name? My name is Kansiime and I come from Kabale. What's your name? Why are you calling me? What can you do in my house? Then you sleep in the same bed. Then get married and give us children and live happy ever after. That's why you are calling me. No, don't go away. You don't do it for us. You do not go around calling people when you're not sharing what you want to tell them. Next time you're going to be serious with someone, be sure you know what to tell them. What's your phone number? Hurry up. Why you have to call it? When you don't call a number, but they are not there. You know that's my number. Let me be the first person to call you. Maria, I would say, see, then when we come to run away, yes, we are looking for them to us. And they're like, okay, that's not one number. I'll wait for you.
Just the Uganda part, the idea of partnering is like, you want me to be your girlfriend, but when I can't, you're running away. So now I'm asking you, I'm forcing you, because we're looking for people to partner, to be our boyfriends, and we can't find. So now I'm telling you, you will. That's what partnering means. Catcalling is a universal experience if you're a woman. You know that. That many women have to face on a daily basis. Instead of feeling embarrassed and intimidated by this uncalled for public display of attention, Kansiime stands up to the man by confronting him directly and demanding that he take her out on a date. By reversing roles, her comic persona takes control of an otherwise humiliating situation. She refuses to be the object of desire of the male gaze. Instead, through her verbal dexterity, she browbeats the man into doing what she wants him to do. He becomes the subject of her outrage and her potential female desire. To put it differently, by interacting with him on her own terms, it is she who has the last word. It is she who determines the terms of engagement of this relationship. Elsewhere, Kathleen Rowe observes that women with access to visual and public platforms possess power that is used to renegotiate forms of public display. Rowe quotes Teresa de Loret, who advocates for the strategic use of narrative to construct other forms of coherence, to shift the terms of presentation, to produce the conditions of respectability of another ungendered social subject. By returning the male gaze, we might expose the gazer. And by utilizing the power already invested in us as an image, we might begin to negate our own invisibility in the public sphere. Similarly, through internet platforms, Kansiime and her comic persona use humor to construct another narrative. Her acerbic tongue is used to outwit and ridicule her opponent. She's constructed a persona who is never apologetic and does not lose an argument. Instead, she always has a clean comeback for every situation, and this has become the formula of her comedy. More importantly, in most of her comedy sketches, the verbal humor is deliberately used to challenge and destabilize hegemonic gender norms. As Olympus Ejua reminds us in relation to Nigerian stand-up comedy, but equally applicable here, apart from playing the role of an entertainer, the comedian must, through his or her artistic creation, ridicule actions of men and societal ills in order to project the truth. The essence of truth-telling, even by a gesture's art, is encapsulated in the adage, many a true word is spoken in jest. Through the typecast of a quarrelsome, assertive, impetuous, rude, annoying, yet humorous woman who has a solution for every problem, Kansiime emerges as the victor, never the victim. In an interview, Kansiime reveals that her parents are funny people, but admits that she is mostly inspired by her mother. She says of her mother, she never loses an argument. She's extremely witty. You can never catch her off guard. She will find something to say. I just exaggerate her actions. According to Andrea Greenbaum, who quotes Cameron, women are brought up to think of assertion, authority, and forcefulness as masculine qualities which they should avoid. They are taught instead to display the feminine qualities of weakness, passivity, and deference to men. They point out that women's passivity in language is perpetuated generationally since girls imitate their mother's speech, as well as other feminine role models. This may apply to the relationship between Kansiime and her mother. However, both disrupt societal norms because her mother is loud and humorous. She has learned to be assertive, forceful, and vocal. Kansiime, the comedian, has created this persona that allows her to speak for those who fear to speak. One could argue that she's engaged in a form of subversive humor that simultaneously draws on societal notions of women in order to expose and critique patriarchal discourse. Kansiime, like many female comics, is concerned with issues of marriage, romance, and in-flow relationships, gender dynamics, and ordinary everyday experiences. She insists on depicting strong women and refuses to represent women as passive and submissive by portraying women in unconventional gender roles. If we look at contemporary Ugandan literature, and I've argued this elsewhere, I have argued that it is the site of feminist insurgence. In the context I argued that, I was focusing on FemRight Publications, a publishing house that was developed by the Ugandan Women's Writers Association. I argued that the emergence of FemRight could be read as a site for the articulation of a feminist critique and comments on the various forms of cultural and political marginalization of women located at the intersection of modernity and tradition. I also argued there that the female voice in Ugandan literature can be traced to Okot Betek's Lawino, from Song of Lawino. Although I noted that as a nationalist writer, Betek was ventriculizing through Lawino to express his concerns on issues of tradition and modernity, I suggest that a feminist reading of Lawino allows us to understand her voice as one of rebellious resistance. The voice I noted is echoed in contemporary women fiction. The female characters portrayed by Ugandan women writers can be read as Lawino's fictional daughters. I would like to stretch that argument here by saying that the Ugandan women comedians can be read as neo-oral performance. In other words, I would like to think of the comic personas they create as Lawino's granddaughters. Kansiime, interestingly, does not produce her material on her own. She has a creative team of 5 led by comedian Clotilda Inapo. This means that women are responsible for writing, producing, and performing the comedy sketches. Not only is this material potentially submissive, but these female neo-oral performances are challenging hegemonic comedic discourses that tend to be masculine. In contemporary Ghana, for Kansiime and her creative team, humor is an alternative platform that offers comedians the space in which to speak, give opinions, generate jokes on their own term. This female laughter is about self-assertion and disrupting political discourses within the public sphere. Kansiime's humor is not easily defined. However, I would maintain that it is a hybrid form that combines observational, clean insult, meaning she has clean, there's no explicit in her language, and sketch comedy. Kansiime's comedy makes fun of people, anyone, and any situation, including women. Nonetheless, unlike masculine humor, where women are laughed at, for Kansiime, the humor is produced to ridicule internalized patriarchal ideas, attitudes, and values. Popular culture in the public space is a reworking and extension of traditional and modern categories of culture that speaks to local audiences about pressing concerns, experiences, and struggles in new ways. Dina Ligaga argues persuasively that the internet provides alternative routes of expression of popular culture, bringing to the fore aspects of social and political lives and ideas that would otherwise have remained hidden from public discourse. Therefore, I'd like to argue that Kansiime's humor and online presence are a statement to the far-reaching influence of popular culture in Africa. Kansiime's popularity can be attributed to the virtual communities that make her accessible to a global audience. But I don't want to create the impression that internet platforms are always a medium for liberating humor. On the contrary, the internet and its anonymity seems to elicit all kinds of deplorable behavior from ordinary people. However, for purposes of this presentation, I restrict myself to the transgressive humor that Kansiime produces and circulates via social and new media. These platforms are also spaces in which she has access and she can deal directly with her fans, who she calls her ninjas. Kansiime's humor is based on the construction of a comic persona who is loudmouth and difficult. In all her sketches, she's always involved in an argument she has to win. I would like to use the notion of the unruly woman to argue that we could consider Kansiime to be an unruly woman. She's unruly because she's loud, and she uses parody to make visible and laughable the unspeakable. All this is performed on the internet, which simultaneously opens her up to criticism and confronts normative attitudes and values. To put it differently, it is a form of feminist resistance that undermines our understanding of societal norms, societal and cultural norms. What I'm trying to do in this presentation and in the larger paper is I'm trying to show that Kansiime can be read as Lawino's granddaughter, who is using online platforms to critique society. I also am trying to demonstrate that Kansiime's comedy is not only about entertainment. Instead, her humor is used to do various things. And it's about critique, but it's also used, she uses it financially to make herself money. And so if you go and look at her YouTube channel, she's able to make money off her YouTube channel. And some of the proceeds that she has made from her YouTube channel, she then reinvests in civil society. So she has a foundation that provides scholarship for children who are not able to, bursaries for children who are not able to go to school. Kansiime, the comedian and the comic persona, is using online platforms as a site of resistance that enables her to speak publicly. It is not only the humor that is potentially subversive, but also the female comedian, the unruly woman who destabilizes and disrupts existing power structures by critiquing society. For Kansiime, the ritual of speaking is a political act. We're moderating ourselves. We have 5 minutes. Charlene says 5 minutes. For questions.
Two comments. Is your work available? Because I'd really like to read it. Is it available online yet? Your page? Not yet. Okay. And then loved your presentation. It speaks to what I'm going to talk to also.
And it kind of like, because I was a bit, ooh, do you even talk about the hashtag movement without being cancelled? So it kind of gave me permission to speak now, so I really like that.
Any other councilman? Yeah?
Maybe a comment, or I'm just thinking aloud. Trying to refer to your paper. So you were talking about women's performances of self in online spaces, and you were focusing more on married women. So I'm like thinking in this direction. How do married women's performances of self in these online spaces differ from single ladies? Like in the sense, for instance, okay, now I'm married. Okay, so before I get to post anything online, I'm very careful about the DPs, the comments I make, the kind of pictures I post, and all of those things, which I would like just do them if I was single without having a second thought, So how does this space actually, make me, kind of, act a certain way, or take on. You get my point. So how does the institution of marriage, kind of affect how women perform their identities in this spaces? Yeah. And also, flips over to Londiwe. Sorry, I want to ask first of all, are you a Sangoma?
Yes, I am.
Okay, yeah. So now I was wondering, because you were talking of women's what I read it somewhere. How we constantly mediate between different performances of self. So I'm like, okay, like a sangoma now, and correct me if I'm wrong. That institution is mostly patriarchal in the sense that you're. Forgive me if I'm wrong, and correct me as well. And you're dealing with ancestors, and in African tradition, ancestors are mostly male. So how do you mediate with, as a feminist, how do you mediate with these different, performances of self, as a feminist and as someone who is answerable to a male ancestor? And again, how I've noted that most Sangomans, like wearing traditional dresses and like doing some traditional things. Okay, so how do you, maybe answer to someone who is like, oh, why is a Sangoma, wearing a chana or earring that you're putting on, because it's not. Oh, I'm going to, like the wig you're putting on. Yes. So how do you respond to it?
Nonhlanhla, do you understand?
Okay. All right. So you'll find that as women, there are so many discourses that we tap into and that inform our subjectivities. So you'll find that for some women who are traditional and conservative, it will be very hard for them to post online because they have so many reservations, mainly due to the patriarchal gender order. But then there are some women, the modern rights-based femininities, who are out there and they are very free. They can post anything. They can post their homes, they can post their husbands and their children. So I think basically it depends with your background and what you feel comfortable with.
I think for me, I'm very lucky that I went to an initiation school in a fairly, I use this word very carefully, liberal space, right? In a fairly free kind of space. And so I am who I am, and my ancestors know me. and so I haven't had any difficulties being myself, whether I want to wear a wig today or I want to wear my dress today, and I mean they'll very clearly communicate when they don't want you to do certain things. So there's that. But then when it comes to the question of patriarchal spaces, nobungoma, I think it's much more complex than it appears to be or than has been spoken about. Because if I am Isangoma that has a male ancestor, I'm a man. Right? So that complicates my life a little bit. In my real world, it complicates my life a little bit when I'm home. So I think it's much more complex. I think maybe someone must write a paper. But I think it's much more complex than that.
Thank you very much. For those who are staying here, you don't have to do much except go and have some more tea. But for, I'm running out of time, but you can speak to any of us. You can grab us anytime. But we need people who need to move back to graduate schools, to move back to graduate schools. And it is about the 10 minutes for some of us. So thank you so much for coming, and please engage with